Hello everybody. Today we are going to learn the very basic element of mandala art, and that is this pattern that you see. You may have seen this everywhere, and this is the very basic pattern, and I hope you're able to see very clearly, and I have other colors also in case this helps. Yeah, maybe this is a better one. So you see how this pattern is developed. So we are going to learn just very basic techniques of how I do this. So let's get started. So to start with, I'm going to demonstrate with two different colors. I recommend that you start with just one and then grow eventually on the gradient style of it. Okay, but I'm going to use only two different colors. One to do the center dot, or maybe one to do the center dot, and these ones to do the dots on the outside. Okay, so I'll take a pink one, and here I am taking a 6 mm cylindrical dotting tool. Okay, so just select an area on the pad and get started. So go for the center dot. It doesn't have to be a certain size, but make sure that your center dot is a little bigger than the outer dots so that you can distinguish between the dots. Okay, now I'm going to use my smallest dotting tool, or if not the smallest, but at least on the thinner end. So I'm using a 1.5. I don't know if you can see. Okay, yeah, so I'm going to use this 1.5 end, okay, to do the external ring of the dots. So I'll just use one color, as I said, not to confuse you. Okay, so main idea is to observe a 90-degree angle line with the horizontal. I should have actually drawn. So if you take a pencil and just draw like a 90-degree. Yeah. Okay, so I am assuming that my pattern will go like this. You don't have to draw the pattern like how I did, but just to get started, if that helps, definitely do that. Okay, also maybe the pattern will go a little, like this. Okay, so load up your tool and do the first dot in the center. Okay, just above the center dot, and then walk back on the dots, creating a boundary between the center dot and the outer dots. Okay, so you can see that this is walking the dots is what we call as. Okay, so I would generally recommend one dot on each side at the same time so that you can create a symmetrical line of dots. Okay, but if you're comfortable, you can also do the same way that I am doing. So this is how the pattern looks like with the first round of dots. Now the next round of dot is what I'm going to do is, so my idea is to create a pattern that goes like this. Okay, so this, you see this line should trace like this. This line should trace like this, so that when you take a peek from a certain angle, they look all in same line. Okay, so in order to do that, I'm going to make a little bigger dot right on top of the center dot. Okay, and if you notice that I'm still using the same dotting tool, 1.5 mm. So you can use the same dotting tool and still create a little bigger dot. You don't need to change dotting tools for every little bigger dot that you're creating. So if you see that my second line of dots should also line up in a certain symmetrical pattern. Okay, so this should create that line and this should create that line like that. Okay, so, and also another rule that I follow is, so I'm dotting one dot between the two inner circle of dots. So if you see, this dot is also in the center of these two dots. Okay, so again, go for symmetrical line of dots rather than going on one side the whole time. And make sure to load up your tool after every dot. That's when you get perfect round dots. And up to a certain point you can do that, and then you can start walking the dots like this. Okay, and while you're walking the dots, you don't need to see the center. So as long as your top, 1, 2, 3 or maybe 4 dots are in the rule of centered dots, then you're good to go. Okay, so now go for the next line of dots. So again, so you see the second line of dots, so we are going to trace the same path. That's when it'll become a leaf pattern. It's just a leaf pattern that will come out of it. Okay, so go for the top dot a little bigger than the center dot of your previous line. Okay, just load up the tool a little more with the paint. Okay, so now again, observe that symmetry. Okay, and do the dot for the third line. So again, when you're going for the dots here, so another way to make it look more full and not having too much of gaps between the dots, because more and more we are going outwardly with the dots, because we're observing the symmetry, the gap may seem a little too much, so we'll have to observe that. So in order to make up for the gaps, what we generally do is we increase the size of the dots as we grow outward. Okay, but also at the same time create the center dot, create the dots exactly at the center of the previous two dots. Okay, so now you can walk the path, walk the dots. Okay, this is how it looks after 3 rounds of dots. Okay, now go for the fourth round of dots, and again you draw this line of symmetry and see how the leaf is formed. So this time around, just load up your tool a little more to make the dots a little more fuller with the paint. Okay, my paint consistency is very thick, So if you see this, it's really very thick. It's not supposed to be this thick, but yeah, if you are struggling with your paint consistency like this, make sure you thin it down. So I'm still observing the center point of the dots, but this time around, if you see the dots, the gap between the dots are quite much. So I'll have to go back on those dots and fill them up with more paint so that they look a little more fuller. Okay. And this is how the leaf forms. Okay. You don't have to really stick around with the shape that you initially drew. You can go a little beyond that. As you can see, my overall pattern is kind of going outside of that, but that's totally fine. Okay, so this time around, I'm going to use a different color of my paint just to show that, you know, the dots are lining up well. Okay, so I'm going to use pretty pink this time. Yeah, this consistency of the paint is really nice. So again, observe the line, you know, of the dots. So every time you do a dot, you'll have to observe certain amount of symmetry with your previous line of dots. That's the rule. Okay, so if you go by exactly how the rules suggest, you will create a beautiful symmetrical pattern, and that's what mandala is all about. Okay, mandala is not about just the dots, but it is also about how you create that symmetrical pattern. And whatever your pattern is, if you're symmetric, you've done half the job. So that's about it. And that's our pattern. So if you take a close look, you will see how the dots are lined up really nicely. And I have some practice materials on Etsy, and the link is down in the description box and also in the comment, the first comment that I'm going to pin. So go ahead and click on that link for practice materials that you can download from Etsy, and have a happy dotting.